So I'm sure most of you know about the mail order system. Like you have a general idea of how it works. But did you know that the mail order system was also available in early America? No? Yes? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Dallas here. It's Vlog Every Day in April Day 24, and we're going to talk about mail order brides in early colonial America. Most of the first adventurers that set out for Jamestown or New France or Louisiana were men. What leads to male bride scenarios is when you have a big disparity in the gender population, especially more men than women, and specifically more men than what were deemed marriable women. There may be a lot of women around, but none that they or their home country would deem marriable. Marriable was basically based on race and background. Unmarriable were basically Native Americans, and there were men who were starting to have relationships with these Native women. So the question was, how do you keep men colonists in these towns when they don't want to be there because it's pretty awful and they don't have companionship or the domestic help that they're used to having back home? During the colonial period in early America, the northern colonies did not have a problem with recruitment. The people who were coming over in, like, say, Massachusetts were escaping brutal religious persecution. They would bring their families because it was just so bad, and they would stay for the long haul. However, in the southern English colonies, like Jamestown, they did not have the same religious motivations. First off, the conditions were pretty terrible, and people were dying off very quickly. Rumors about how bad things were getting back to England, and the women especially were like, nope. Men still went because of economic motivation. They would go, stay a few years, make a decent amount of money, come back to England, and then marry. Or they would go to these colonies, make their money, stay there, and end up sticking with the Native American women and deserting the colonizational effort. This was a hanging offense, but no one cared. And the men coming back to England after a few years was a big problem for England and the Virginia Company because they wanted to establish settlements there. This also had major political implications because if you're trying to say that your culture or religion, etc., is superior, having your colonists there say that actually the culture you're trying to conquer is pretty awesome or great, or at least way better than the conditions they're in, you have a major problem. So the Virginia Company had to do something very quickly. So the company in England teamed up to do a major recruiting efforts for women in England to come overseas to Jamestown. And they heard all these horrible rumors about people dying and, Indian raids, etc., etc. So they had to make the offers really, really good. They made sure to make it voluntary recruitment because there was major kidnapping happening in the 17th century during colonizational times, and England definitely wanted these women to go voluntarily because then they would most likely stay. So the first thing they offered was free passage to the States. And that was really important because no one was going to go pay to go over and be in like the worst conditions imaginable. The company also wanted to appeal to women who were of a certain class, who wasn't, destitute and poor or sick. So they made sure to offer dowries. The dowries were really good for lower middle class women or women who were working in domestic help and building up wealth or enough wealth to establish their own household and marry someone in their social standing. Either were able to quit working in domestic help or didn't have to go at all because the dowry was basically offer them the money that they were going to save up anyway, and give them a social rise, which they couldn't do back in England. The other incentive was, once they were over there, they did not have to marry. The Virginia Company would provide food and shelter for as long as they were looking. They didn't have to marry certain kinds of men, and they could take as long as they would like to choose. And these women became dubbed as the tobacco wives because once the women did choose a man to marry, the man would then pay back the Virginia Company for the money that they spent on the passage for the woman to come over. They would pay them with $120 worth of good leaf tobacco. So it was like the women were being sold, but it was always the woman's choice. The woman would choose the man. It was never the other way around. And also, the women didn't have to marry wealthy men. They could marry poor men, and the Virginia Company would just eat the losses of the free passage. And this wasn't much of a risk for the Virginia Company because most women and most men at that time married for economic prospects. Women would choose the men they wanted to marry, and most likely they would choose the men who were more of the rich farmer variety. Those men would easily be able to pay back the company. Back then, modern love as we know it now was considered an inconvenience, and it also hurt the bargaining power that the women had going into these marriages. And the Virginia Company got what they wanted because most of the women did go over and marry quickly, and that allowed the men to stay longer. But there was an issue because obviously early colonials, most of the women died, but the ones who did survive ended up becoming very wealthy and had a lot of power. So much so that there's evidence with like legislature grumblings about the legislature complaining that the women had too much power, there was too many of these wealthy women hanging around, and that England needed to do something with them. But of course they didn't, because they wanted the women to stay over there because it was keeping the colonists there. So in the end, this mail order incentive program ended up working for England, for the Virginia Company, and most importantly for the women. They were able to have more freedoms than they did over in England, more options, and more wealth. But tomorrow I will continue talking to you about New France and how they use the mail order program for their benefit, and also talk to you about Louisiana and how it absolutely did not work for them. So that's all for me. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.